Nothing in this podcast or on our website should be construed as medical advice. Consult your healthcare provider for your individual nutritional and medical needs. The information presented is based on our research and is strictly that of the author and not necessarily those of any professional group or other individual.
Hi, I'm Sue Becker from Bread Beckers. Welcome to Sue's Healthy Minutes. I'm so excited you've joined me today, and I hope this episode encourages you and allows you to find the answers you have been praying for the health of you and your family. Today on Sue's Healthy Minutes, it's time for yet another It's the Bread story. My guest today is Pamela Haugeland. Pamela commented on one of our podcast posts with just a little of her story, and I know when you hear her whole story, you will be as encouraged as I am. When I reached out to Pamela, she quickly agreed to come on Sue's Healthy Minutes, but then reminded me that though she grew up in Illinois, she now lives in Norway. So despite our 6-hour time difference, Pamela is here to share with you all. So Pamela, thank you so much for joining me today. It's such an honor to have you on. Why don't you begin by telling everyone just a little bit about yourself, maybe even how and when you ended up in Norway?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. First, let me just say I'm thrilled to bits to be able to meet you and speak to you, Sue. I have been binge watching and listening to your things on YouTube starting in about February. And I think my husband is like, haven't you listened to this woman enough? And I'm like, no.
Oh my goodness. So February of this year.
Yeah, of this year. So yeah, I grew up in a really small town in Illinois. And when I was in high school, my family had a foreign exchange student from Norway who lived with us for a year. And the year after she went back to Norway, I came over for the summer holidays to visit her. And one night I met a cute boy.
Oh,
And now, 45 years later, he's still cute, but he's not a boy. But anyway, the rest is history. So we've been married a long time.
yes.
And we have 3 children, 2 grandchildren, and a new grandbaby on the way, for which I'm really excited.
Oh, yes. Those grandbabies are exciting.
Oh, they're the best
Yes.
for sure.
Yes.
But yes, I had a very straightforward childhood. I had great parents. My mom was a stay-at-home mom, and she made all her food from scratch. Her mother did the same, and we didn't have junk food in the house really at all when I was growing up. And I think that was a good thing. I will say that when I was about 12 or 13, my mom's mom taught me to bake bread. So that was the first time I ever baked a loaf of bread. And it was obviously way better than all the stuff you get in the grocery stores and what have you. But anyway, I just a regular childhood, apart from when I was 9 years old. I first got a really bad flu. And after the flu cleared up, the Guillain Barre set in. And I do apologize to people who might think they know the right way to pronounce that illness, but that's the way it was said to me when I was a child. I ended up being paralyzed. It was a slow paralysis that starts down and works its way up. And in the end, I was paralyzed so that all I could do was turn my neck. All of my body was paralyzed. And so I just narrowly missed having to go into an iron lung or to, whatever they put people in back in those days. But in the end, it all passed away, but I was paralyzed for 4 months. And I don't think it left me with any serious damage apart from, I sort of a bit of a klutz, I would like to say. My sort of all my muscles and all my balance went away from it. And also a real tendency to catch every cold that comes down the pike. And all my life growing up until like now, which I'll say more in a minute, all my life, if I catch a cold, I would catch about 4 colds a year at least, and they would last about 3-4 weeks each time, and I would be really congested. And it was just, my immune system seemed to have taken a real hit from that illness that I had as a child. I mean, I can't document that that's the reason, but it's the only reason I can understand. It's an interesting thing that I have never had a flu shot because after I had the Guillain Barre, my mother's doctor said that she should not let me get a flu shot. I'm not an anti-vaxxer or anything like that, but I just never got that shot because there was something about, I don't know if it's because your immune system might be compromised, that perhaps getting the flu shot could bring the Guillain Barre back. If you've ever had it once, you might be more at risk of having it. So I never did get any of those shots, and I just got the bad colds. Nobody else got them as bad as I did. But apart from that, I had quite a normal childhood.
So the colds have continued on. Your
My
susceptibility.
whole life until now, up until now, they're done because that's the thing. Now, that's a thing of the past, but that lasted my entire adult life.
Yeah.
Um, my husband can tell you that, we would get a cold at the same time. His would be over in a few days. Mine would go on for weeks. And that's just
Oh my
how it
goodness.
always was.
Wow. So just for our listeners, the Guillain Barre, it affects your peripheral nervous system and it results in that loss of coordination. But you went on to actually become paralyzed. That must have really affected you growing up, and was a bit scary maybe.
Well, the interesting thing about that is I was 9 when it happened. And I think, and this has been a great comfort to me later on, I think children don't really have the sophistication of awareness to understand just how scary something is and things
Yeah.
like death or whatever, because I have met just a couple of other people who've had it and they've had it as adult, and their experience was different. With me, I was the center of attention for 4 months. Everything was about me and what I wanted and what I needed. So, in a way, I was having kind of a good time. That's how I remember it.
Oh, that's funny. I mean, not funny, but it is funny that the perspective, you're so right. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's good to think of when other children have a serious illness, that it's not as bad for them maybe as it is for their adults around them. Because for my mother and my father, it was really tough.
Yes, I
Um,
can imagine.
and I just remembered that I was having a good time, and my mother said, "Don't you remember the time when you couldn't move anything but turn your neck from side to side and you couldn't breathe?" And well, to this day, I don't remember that. And I'm very grateful for that because I don't think it's a memory I need.
Exactly. So you said you've been binge watching YouTube videos and listening to the podcast. So how in the world did you first hear about Bread Beckers and what led you to stumbling on us if you did?
Well, I did stumble on you, and I'm forever grateful for that. What led me to that is the fact that I conceived a great interest in baking my own bread. Because my mother has suffered with IBS for a lot of years. And when we were at my niece's wedding in America last September, her new husband is a chef and he made some amazing California sourdough bread, which my mother could eat.
Yeah.
And my mother said, regular bread I buy from the stores, and it really, I can't deal with it. It kicks off my IBS, but she could eat that amazing bread that he made without a problem. And having not heard of you yet or the freshly milled grains, I started thinking sourdough. So after the first of the year, I started experimenting with learning how to do sourdough. And, after the pandemic, I think YouTube became the place where everybody went to learn anything they ever want to know in the world. So I
Mm-hmm.
was surfing the net, YouTube, looking for things about bread baking in general, sourdough in particular. And then I came across, I think the first thing I saw from you is that one beautiful long YouTube teaching thing you did about teaching
Yeah.
about bread.
Only real bread is the staff of life. That one. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I'm just saying, I've watched it 3 times, and chances are I'll watch it again. But one of the things that really intrigued me was the thing about how quickly all the vitamins and minerals disappear after grain has been milled. And I think you said something like 90% is gone after the first few days.
Yes. Some of them. Yes.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. I mean, and I just thought, well, that just sounds too crazy. So I did what I do. I got online and I started researching, and I found that you are not the only one who was saying that it really, many others have said how quickly the vitamins and minerals lose their potency after milling. So I decided, well, this is for me. This is what I'm going to do. I had figured out how to make some sourdough starter, and but I didn't have a grain mill. As a matter of fact, I only have something to mill grains that I got now in September because it was my birthday, and I asked for it for my birthday. But from about February up until September, I did what the only thing I could do. I would soak whole grains overnight and then put them in a blender with some water, and I would blend them until they became this paste. And then I would add, other flour in to make a bread dough, because that was the only way I could get actual whole grains and do them myself, because I didn't have a mill.
So you were using a blender. Oh,
Yeah.
wow. Yeah.
It just goes to show you, where there's a will, there's a way. So it worked. It worked quite well. Although now I do have something to mill the grains with, and that makes life a lot easier. So I'm very glad to have done that. But the only reason I say this about the blender is, as long as you have a blender, you can still do that. If you're waiting to save up to get a good grain mill, there's always a way to get this done. And to me, it makes all the difference in the world. And the first thing I noticed when I started doing these grains this way is that now I don't know exactly if it's old age or it was COVID or what, but over the last couple of years, have been losing a lot of hair. And my nails have never been good my whole life. They've been the kind that just like peel and chip away and there's nothing. But after I changed to this bread with whole grains, my nails are as strong as anything. They've never been like this before in my life. And also, my hair is growing back. The last time I went to the hairdresser, she said, well, I don't know what you're doing, but you have all these new hairs on your head.
Oh, my goodness.
And that's the only thing I have changed in my diet in any manner, shape, or form. And I would love to say that I have the skin of a 20-year-old, but unfortunately, if you do the math, you'll realize I couldn't possibly be that. but but so all this hair that was falling out, and actually my hairdresser says that she has noticed amongst her lady customers that lots of people have been losing a lot of hair. And whether it's from the COVID vaccine or the COVID virus, she can't say, but she's quite convinced that something about this has not been great for that, and lots of ladies are losing their hair. Well, maybe that's the reason why I was losing hair, maybe not. However, now I have lots of new hair growing in, and my hair has stopped falling out. I was going through a phase where every time I would brush my hair, just handfuls of hair were falling out. Now, nothing happens. I'm keeping all of my hair. It's nothing short of miraculous, as far as I'm concerned, anyway.
Yes, and I think it's the good vitamin E and vitamin A and the B vitamins. My goodness, those are so important for the growth of your hair. And I've actually heard that about COVID. I've heard many people say that after and during the time they had COVID and for months after, their hair just fell out by the handfuls. That's interesting.
So, apart from the fact that my nails are now strong as anything, and I have to file them and trim them, otherwise they'll grow to be a ridiculous size, which they never in my whole life did before. Between that and my hair, I feel convinced that it's the bread. And then there's this other thing, which I literally only just like last week twigged. It's just realized, and that is, I think that there's something to do with the immune system, for me anyway, that might have been affected with the Guillain Barre, which is the reason why I have traditionally gotten such terrible colds that last so long. And also, now, I don't know if you all or anybody else notices it, but I'm a relatively healthy person. But when I go to bed at night, once I've been in bed at night a bit, my nose would get stuffy. And the older we get, maybe the worse that is. But it literally only about 2 weeks ago dawned on me that hey, my nose doesn't get stuffy when I go to bed anymore.
That's interesting because that's exactly what I noticed in the first few months. Actually, the first month, I had to take antihistamines to be able to sleep at night because when I would lay down, my nose would get stuffy, my head would, I couldn't breathe, and that was one of the first things I noticed
Yeah.
was. And that was all I changed was the bread.
Yeah.
And I say that I haven't had an antihistamine since 1991. And that's really interesting that you had that exact
Yeah.
same phenomenon at
Yeah,
night.
exactly.
Yeah, getting all congested. Yeah.
And so the thing is too that it was sort of not long before that I started to realize I'm not getting colds anymore. Um, couple of months into using the freshly milled grains, my husband got a cold, and aren't husbands wonderful? He just decided to share his cold with me. Thank you very
Oh, I
much.
know. They're so nice. That's so thoughtful.
But so anyway, so he got a cold, which of course meant that I got a cold. But my cold was gone in 3 days, and it wasn't even a very bad cold. And I didn't need any antihistamines or anything for it. And I thought, well, gee, that's the oddest cold I've ever had in my life, but I'm
Yeah,
grateful. And then, um, about it's been about a month or so ago, my husband got another cold, which he again very graciously shared with me. And on this occasion, it lasted for 24 hours and it went away.
that's amazing.
And so that happened. And then I started thinking, I'm not stuffy when I'm going to bed at night. And I'm thinking, this must have something to do. I'm not a doctor, so what do I know? But maybe it has something to do with my immune system has just improved because of the extra vitamins and minerals that are in the freshly milled grains.
Absolutely. I'm convinced that it is. And colds are, of course, a virus. And vitamin E protects the integrity of every cell in our body and protects us from that viral invasion because the virus has to invade your cell. And so if our cells are weakened, we're going to be more susceptible to colds and flu and viruses and that are going to last longer. And I don't think you're alone in that. And, this is something I try to tell people when they say, oh, will the bread help with this, with that, or whatever? I said, I don't know, but here's what I do know. And I'm not saying you'll never get a cold again or you'll never get sick again. But what I have noticed when I do, I get over it quickly, just like you're noticing.
Exactly. And it's interesting because when I first came to Norway many, many, many years ago, I sort of originally fell in love with bread because Norway is a real bread eating nation. And the bread here is not like the stuff you buy in the grocery stores in the US. It really is, or used to be, really good stuff. And in Norway, people will have open faced sandwiches for breakfast and they will have open faced sandwiches for lunch, and then they'll have a dinner, and then they used to traditionally eat dinner quite early, like sort of maybe 5 o'clock in the afternoon, which meant that their children would be hungry before bed, and they would give them a couple of more slices of bread, open-faced sandwiches. At night, we have a word for it in Norwegian. We call it kveldsmat, which means evening food, which is usually a couple of slices of bread.
Oh, I love it. Say that word again. I love it.
Kveldsmat. Kveld meaning evening and mat meaning food.
Evening food.
And so really, I mean, this is it. My children had, we take school lunches to school. They don't do hot lunches in Norway, and you bring your sandwiches and a piece of fruit or that sort of thing. So bread is the real business. And my elder daughter, the one who's having a baby in January, she said to me once as a child, she said, "Mom, I think I could just live on sandwiches. I don't think I need any other kind of food."
Oh, I love it.
But the interesting thing is that when I've been looking into this with bread, I have um, a couple of my Norwegian friends who've said to me, Norwegian bread isn't what it used to be.
Yeah.
Norwegian bread today has changed. It's become much more ultra processed, and you buy these cheap loaves of bread that are, I still would have liked to claim better than the cheap bread in America, but they aren't what they used to be. And I thought about that, and it's very true. And the bread that I'm making now reminds me much more of the bread of this country for 40 years ago.
Yes. Yeah.
And, we went through one of these, anti-grain, everything must be keto, no starches kind of thing in Norway, just like the rest of the world did. But I think that's kind of going away now. And bread is in. During the pandemic, people got really into doing things like baking their own bread because we were at home all the time, of course.
Yeah. And things weren't so readily available in the store. Yeah.
Exactly. So there's, even though our bread in Norway has really been much better, I think European bread has a tradition or a reputation for being a little bit better than American bread.
Yes.
English bread is like American bread. English bread is the same. And now I go to England a lot, and I've been to the United States. I was there at Easter visiting my parents because at age 87 and 88, they're still going strong, for which I'm
Oh,
truly
wow.
grateful. But when I went to America for Easter, and when I've gone to England um, a few times now, I bring my own bread. I put bread in a bag, in a plastic container, and I put it in my suitcase. And I bring my own bread with me
Oh,
when I
yes.
travel abroad.
Oh, yes. I did a whole podcast on Have Bread Will Travel. And the reason I'm baking bread right now is because I have to go to work and we're leaving town tomorrow. So I'm taking bread with me. I made 2 loaves yesterday. I'm making 2 loaves today. That is so funny. Yes.
That's brilliant. I mean, and I went and visited a friend I live in Oslo, which is the capital, and I have a friend down in Kristiansand, which is right at the southern tip of Norway. And I went to stay for 2 days with her, and she said, "So what would you like for breakfast? What would you like?" I said, "No, I brought my own." And she said, "You brought your own bread?" I said, "Yes, I did."
Yes, I did. Yes.
And I have one more sort of funny story about that. A really good friend of mine just turned 60 in June, and I've been raving about this bread because I rave about it to everyone. And
It's hard not to, isn't it? It's
it
just hard.
is.
Yes.
I mean, it's a whole nother kettle of fish, as they say. But my friend, so when she turned 60, she said, "Pamela, I'd really like you to teach me how to make this bread." So on her birthday, I brought over all the fixings to make the bread. I brought some sourdough starter. I brought the grains that I had soaked ready to put in her blender, and I brought a bread pan, and I brought everything. And we spent the entire day in her kitchen baking bread. And she told me that was just about the best birthday gift anybody could ever have given her. She was thrilled to bits.
Oh, I love it. I love it so much. That is amazing. So you're going to make a believer out of her, I bet you.
Oh, I already have done. And my husband, God bless him, he loves the bread as well. So he's like, if I'm going away, he's like, "So have you left some bread in the freezer for me then?" "Oh, yes, dear, I have."
Yes, I have. Oh, I love that. That is so good. I don't know how anybody would not love it.
Oh, I know.
It not only is it nutritious, this is my saying, not only is it nutritious, it's delicious. And I think
Absolutely.
that's the exciting thing. And so I know that most of our listeners are in the U.S., but for those outside the U.S., have you been able to find wheat readily and other supplies readily available for you there in Norway?
It's a little harder here. I have been. It's not that easy to find whole grains, but there are a few really good health food stores and a couple of suppliers. That's one of the things that's on the rise here. There have been a couple of articles in some newspapers and things lately about local farmers growing wheat and emmer and spelt and
Yes.
rye and barley. Barley and rye have always been big in this country anyway. But some local farmers who are growing and um, often organic these grains, and they are setting up some places where you can get it. There's a supplier that my supplier
Yeah,
that I get my grains from, and but he's actually run out of emmer because when I make my bread, I make a bread that's a little um, bit like that Ezekiel bread because I
uh-huh.
use spelt, emmer, rye, and lentils.
Oh, wow. That sounds
And
good.
and that works. It's amazing the wonderful bread you can make with many things. I use wheat if I'm doing like some pancakes or things, but for my bread, it's these other ones I use. And there's not that many places that you can get it here, but you can. And a grain mill is really not a thing you can get here. So I asked for and received on my birthday in September a Vitamix and a dry grain grinder thing for the Vitamix. So that's what I use now
Oh,
because
nice.
the lovely mills I hear you all talking about, I have not been able to get my hands on. So
Oh man. So well, there's a couple that are made. There's Como Mill is made in Germany. I would think you would be able to maybe find that. But oh man. But so perseverance.
absolutely.
And find and use what's local to you. I know rye and barley, like you said, are colder climate grains. That's why it's more popular there.
But we have wheat as well, and we have interesting. There's gotten to be a resurgence of interest in some of these grains because there's something that a kind of there's kind of wheat. It's wheat. It's not the emmer or spelt. It's a wheat, but they call it land wheat or landvete in Norwegian, which is older varieties of wheat that have been found, almost extinct in Norway and in Sweden. And some farmers have decided that they were going to bring these back because they're better suited to our climate than perhaps some of the more modern wheat
Wow.
varieties. But yeah, so it's an interesting experience. I actually, before we finish, I have to tell you a story and ask you a question.
Okay.
So last September, a year ago, noticed a small little lump on my throat, which, long story short, was a thyroid nodule. I had it all checked out. It was nothing, dangerous or anything. But I was told then that 50% of people over the age of 60 have these thyroid nodules, and depending on where they're placed, you might or might not ever notice them, and that there's not much you can do for them, but it's your thyroid, which has to do with your immune system. And you know what? My thyroid nodule is shrinking. Was it with the bread? I don't know. I would love to say it was the bread. But the fact of the matter is, I've had a couple of MRIs and it is shrinking, and I can tell it's going away. And I haven't done anything differently. And maybe they go away by themselves, but I've been told that once you've got them, pretty much you've got them. Have you ever heard anyone talk about thyroid nodules?
Not particularly, but I am so excited to hear you share that. And I have been doing a lot of research on the thyroid because so many, and I don't know if they're in Norway, but here in America, they're telling you stay away from wheat, get off of gluten because it causes these thyroid issues. But I am not finding that connection, and I'm doing some pretty extensive research to try to answer that a little more scientifically and intelligently. But that is amazing to hear.
Well, I would be really thrilled to hear more about that because I do not believe for a New York minute, as they would say,
Yeah.
that wheat and grains are causing the thyroid things. I think there's, I just got done listening to the interview you did with Dr. Ben Edwards. I
Yeah.
love that interview.
Oh, yes.
Amazing.
He is an amazing man, very humble, very, very eager to hear and learn, and there's just no arrogance there at all.
And I just can I swear, that the bread is why it's shrinking? No, I cannot. Do I suspect that it is? Yes,
Yeah.
I do.
Yes,
And one thing I know for sure is it's not making it worse because it's getting smaller. And that started happening after bread, not before bread.
Wow. That's amazing. And I can't wait I've made some notes here, so I can't wait to look into that, because what I'm learning so far is, you hear that gluten has the same structure as your thyroid hormone. So in an autoimmune, it's attacking your thyroid hormone and all of that. So you should stay away from wheat and gluten. And that's just not true. There's no similarity to to the structure of these two compounds.
Well, so
And
they used to say soy was bad for women with breast cancer because it has estrogens, but it's
right,
phytoestrogens and it's not the same thing at all. And
exactly.
that's a myth that has been really hard to kill, that soy will be harmful for breast cancer when in fact it's the opposite,
Right.
So
If it's real, again, it's real. And I understand the connection with the, all of the isolated soy proteins and
oh
soy
yeah.
products. I get that. But just like wheat, it's the bread in the store, just like your mother. She
Yeah.
couldn't eat the bread in the store, but she could eat homemade bread. So
Yeah, exactly.
I get it, and there's more to it than just throwing out the baby with the bathwater, as they say.
Absolutely. I mean, we've seen that a lot in this country because in Norway, boiled potatoes was what people had with their dinner every day. I mean,
Yeah,
as a matter of fact, my husband's old auntie, when we took her out to a restaurant once before she passed, and they asked her, she ordered, I can't remember if it was lamb or what she ordered. They asked her what sort of potatoes she would like with it. And she said, normal potatoes, please. Because in Norway, if you say normal potatoes, everybody knows that means boiled potatoes.
boiled potatoes.
And there was this time when potatoes were so bad for you. Well, French fries and potato chips, yes, they are. But boiled
Yes,
potatoes, baked potatoes, really good. People just kind of make their assumptions before they know all the facts. And that's how we get these problems, I think, anyway.
yes, exactly. So, wow, we could talk forever, I
We
think. So
could. We
we might
could.
have to do a follow-up. We might have to do a follow-up. So, anyway, I just want to thank you so much. I know the time changed. We had to finagle a little bit here, but just thank you for sharing your story today. I always love to give my guests a moment to just share any final words of encouragement that you would like to leave with our listeners before we close.
Oh, gosh. Well, I mean, it would only just be to say that, give this a whirl because you really don't have anything to lose and you have everything to win. And I think that real bread, just like other real food, instead of all this ultra processed stuff that seems to be proliferant all over the world now. I mean, if you get that going and just remember what's important, and I think that will go a long way to help you getting your health back. And I think that's true for all of us. I think these changes can seem a little slight to begin with. It's not like taking a pill and pushing a button and automatically something happens. They're gentle. But isn't that the way God meant them to be? Isn't that how it should be? That we just eat well and we live well and we love our family and that's how life should be.
Yes, exactly. So thank you, Pamela, so much for taking the time out of your busy day. And to everyone listening today, I hope Pamela's story has both inspired and encouraged you. Thank you all for listening today. Until next time, this is Sue Becker from Bread Beckers with Sue's Healthy Minutes.
Sue's Healthy Minutes podcast has been a presentation by the Bread Beckers Incorporated located in Woodstock, Georgia. For more information, store hours, and learning opportunities, visit breadbeckers.com and follow us on Facebook and Instagram. Make sure to subscribe to this podcast and never miss an episode. Share this with 2 friends who would benefit from this information, and be sure to join us again next week for more of Sue's Healthy Minutes.